Blackwood Trading Post, Montana Territory. Late autumn, 1886. Sarah Brennan knew the sound of hunger. It was not the growl of the stomach. That was easy. Hunger was the quiet arithmetic behind every breath. How many hours since the last meal? How many days until winter sealed the roads? How many nights before a body this size became a liability no one wanted to feed? The Blackwood Trading Post was crowded with men preparing for cold. Fur traders, trappers, prospectors. They smelled of iron, whiskey, and fear disguised as bravado. Pelts were stacked like currency on the counters. Flour and salt moved fast, ammunition faster. Women did not move at all. They stood against the wall near the stove, lined up in borrowed dresses and tired faces, waiting to be evaluated the way a man might inspect a mule. Teeth, hips, hands. A few were thin enough to disappear into coats meant for children. Others were already resigned, eyes empty, understanding exactly what winter would demand from them. Sarah sat apart from them, on an overturned crate near the back door. She was too large for the line, too heavy for the narrow expectations of the room. Her dress strained at the seams, her thighs pressed together even when she tried to sit small. She kept her eyes on her hands, thick-fingered and scarred, nails broken from months of scrubbing pots and hauling water. She had been useful once, in kitchens, in camps, in places where endurance mattered more than appearance. But Pike had stopped seeing use, only cost. "You eat like you're afraid it'll disappear," he'd told her that morning, tossing her bundle onto the floor. "And it will. Get out." Now she waited for whatever came after being thrown away. The door opened again, letting in a blade of cold air and a man who cut through the room without looking at anyone. He was enormous, not fat, but built like a tool meant for splitting mountains. Snow clung to his boots. A double-headed axe was strapped across his back like it belonged there. Gunnar Thorsen did not browse. He did not drink. He did not joke. He placed a bundle of prime beaver pelts on the counter and waited. Pike leaned forward, eager. "What'll it be this time, Big Axe? Powder? Lead? You running low on—" "I need help," Gunnar said. The room quieted slightly. Help meant risk. Help meant mouths to feed. Pike's grin sharpened. "Plenty of girls need a roof." Gunnar turned his head, eyes moving once along the wall. He passed over the thin ones, the frightened ones, the girls whose hands had never known weight. His gaze stopped on Sarah. She felt it like heat. "That one," he said. A ripple of laughter moved through the room before anyone could stop it. Pike barked out a laugh. "Her? Christ, she broke 2 chairs last week. Eats more than a mule. You sure you don't want something easier to carry?" Gunnar's eyes never left Sarah. "How much does she owe you?" $50, Pike said. "And that's me being generous." Gunnar untied the pelts and pushed them forward. The fur was thick, flawless, winter grade, worth far more than 50. "She comes with me," Gunnar said. "Now." Pike hesitated only long enough to count his profit. Then he waved Sarah forward. "Your problem now." Sarah stood slowly. Her knees ached, her face burned. Every man in the room watched her cross the floor like a spectacle, waiting for her to trip, to confirm what they already believed. She did not. Gunnar looked down at her. "Can you walk 5 days?" "Yes." "Can you work?" "Yes." "Then move." He turned and left. Sarah followed. Behind them, the door shut.
Civilization stayed on the other side.
Sometimes cruelty does not come with violence. Sometimes it comes with arithmetic. When food grows scarce, compassion becomes a luxury. And those who take up the most space are taught first that they deserve the least. Winter has only just begun for Sarah. Out there beyond the trading post, the cold does not care about pity or prejudice. If you want to know what happens when a woman the world discarded becomes the difference between life and death, follow this story and stay with them into the mountains. The road into the high country, Montana Territory. The first mile outside Blackwood Trading Post set the terms of their arrangement. Gunnar did not slow his pace. He moved the way men did who had learned that hesitation was more dangerous than fatigue. His boots broke crusted snow with steady rhythm, axe handle tapping against his shoulder. He did not look back. Sarah followed. Her breath came loud and uneven in the thin autumn air. The pack Pike had given her was little more than a sack of flour and a spare blanket, but it dragged at her shoulders like an accusation. Her thighs burned, her back ached. She kept her eyes on Gunnar's boots, counting steps the way she used to count ladles of soup when food was rationed. She stumbled near the tree line. Gunnar stopped. The silence was immediate and heavy. He turned slowly, not with anger, but with the flat assessment of a man calculating loss. "If you fall and stay down," he said, "wolves won't wait for night." Sarah pushed herself upright without help. Her hands sank into the snow. Her palms were already numb. "I won't stay down," she said. Gunnar studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once and kept walking. That was the agreement. No comfort, no rescue, only continuation. By the second day, the land rose sharply. Pines thickened. Trails narrowed into something closer to suggestion than road. The wind smelled of ice. Sarah's dress was soaked with sweat beneath her coat, and when she stopped moving, the cold crept in immediately, biting at her skin. She did not complain. That Gunnar noticed. He had expected tears by noon of the first day, begging by nightfall. Instead, she moved like a stubborn draft animal, inefficient but relentless. She fell behind often, but she never stopped. At camp that night, Gunnar worked quickly, fire first, shelter second, food last. Sarah watched, memorizing the order, the economy of motion. She tried to help. Her hands fumbled with the iron pot. The broth tipped. Hot liquid vanished into the snow. The smell of wasted food hit Gunnar like a blow. He stood over the spill, jaw tight. Winter math ran fast in his head. Calories lost, time lost, risk multiplied. Sarah froze, arms half raised, bracing for impact. Gunnar inhaled slowly through his nose. Then he turned away, dug into his pack, and tossed her a strip of dried venison. "Eat," he said. "Tomorrow we work harder." She caught it clumsily. Her eyes filled, shame and relief tangled together. "I ruin everything," she whispered. "You ruin nothing that can't be survived," Gunnar said. "But don't mistake survival for kindness." He slept facing away from her. The third day tested them both. Snow began before dawn, light at first, then steady. Visibility shrank. The trail vanished completely. Gunnar adjusted their route by instinct and memory, moving them lower when the wind sharpened, higher when the ground turned to slush. Sarah's pace slowed further. Her breath wheezed. Her legs trembled. When she finally collapsed, it was silent. No drama. She simply sat down hard on a fallen log and could not stand again. Gunnar stopped several paces ahead. He waited. Seconds passed.
then a minute. She tried to rise, failed, tried again. Her hands shook. Gunnar turned back. He did not offer his hand.
Instead, he took her pack and slung it across his own shoulders without comment. Then he nodded toward her. Up. She stared at him, stunned. I don't carry people, he said, but weight can be moved. She stood slowly. With the pack gone, she could breathe again. They walked on. That night, as the fire struggled against the wind, Sarah worked without being asked. She scraped ice from Gunnar's boots. She fed the fire small, steady pieces instead of dumping everything at once. She learned quickly. Gunnar watched from the edge of his vision. In the mountains, usefulness earned silence, not praise. By the fourth morning, the sky darkened unnaturally fast. The temperature dropped so sharply it felt like stepping into water. Gunnar stopped abruptly. Storm, he said. Bad one. Can we outrun it? Sarah asked. No. He led them to a shallow rock overhang, barely large enough for two bodies. The wind howled almost immediately, snow driving sideways, filling tracks as fast as they were made. The fire would not catch. Gunnar's hands shook as he worked the flint. His breath came in sharp bursts. Sarah noticed before he did, the way his shoulders hunched, the way his jaw locked to stop his teeth from chattering. She had been cold before, starved before. She knew the difference between discomfort and danger. She moved without asking. She opened her coat and wrapped it around both of them, pressing her body against his back, using her weight to block the wind. Her heat flooded the small space between stone and storm. Gunnar stiffened. Don't. You're freezing, she said. I'm not. He tried to pull away, failed. His strength was draining faster than hers. She held firm. The storm screamed all night. Sarah did not sleep. She fed the fire when it flickered. She adjusted her position when the wind shifted. Gunnar drifted in and out of consciousness, murmuring words she could not place. At dawn, the storm broke. Gunnar woke alive. He said nothing. He simply sat up, stared at his hands, then at Sarah. Something had changed. Not trust, not affection, recognition. They crossed a frozen creek that afternoon. The ice gave way beneath Gunnar's weight, swallowing him in silence and shock. Sarah dropped flat, instinctively, spreading her mass, reaching with both arms. She hauled him out inch by inch, her body anchoring him against the pull of water. On the bank, she stripped his soaked clothes without hesitation and pressed herself against him, skin to skin, trapping heat the way she had all her life. When his shivering slowed, Gunnar looked at her with something like disbelief. You saved me, he said. Sarah nodded. That's what I'm for. The world teaches us to judge value by appearance, by speed, by efficiency. But survival has its own language, and sometimes the body dismissed as excess is the one built to endure what others cannot. Is strength what looks powerful, or what remains standing when everything else fails? High country, Montana Territory, early winter. They did not speak about the creek. Gunnar dressed in silence, hands stiff, movements precise. Sarah turned away while he pulled on dry clothes, then handed him the last of the fire-warmed stones to tuck beneath his coat. He accepted them with a nod that meant more than thanks. They walked on. The mountains closed around them, slopes steepening, trees thinning. Snow packed hard beneath their boots, the surface brittle enough to cut skin when it broke. The wind had teeth now, It worried at seams, found gaps in collars, gnawed at exposed flesh. Between them stretched a careful distance, not hostility, caution. They were two strangers bound by necessity, each aware that dependence could become a weakness if named too clearly. By the second night after the storm, Gunnar's pace slowed. He masked it well, but Sarah noticed the hesitation before steep climbs, the way he paused to stretch his hands near the fire longer than necessary. Cold had taken something from him. She did not mention it. Instead, she worked. She learned the rhythm of his routines, when to gather tinder, how to bank a fire so it would breathe through the night, how to break ice on the creek edges without soaking her sleeves. Her movements grew surer, more economical. The mountains did not care about grace. They rewarded persistence. On the third morning, Sarah slipped. It happened fast. A hidden crust gave way beneath her boot, sending her down hard against a rock. Pain flared white and sharp through her ankle. She cried out once before she could stop herself. Gunnar turned immediately. He was beside her in seconds, grip firm, voice low. "Don't move." He knelt, hands rough but careful as he examined her ankle through layers of wool. Swelling already rose beneath his fingers. "You can walk?" he asked. She tried. The pain stole her breath. She shook her head. Gunnar exhaled slowly. The sound carried weight. Calculations again. Distance to shelter, weather patterns, supplies. He did not curse. He did not blame. He tore a strip from his spare shirt, bound her ankle tight, then crouched in front of her. "Climb," he said. "I'm too heavy," Sarah whispered. "You're hurt," he replied. "There's a difference." She wrapped her arms around his shoulders. He lifted her with a grunt, settling her weight across his back. His breath came harder with each step, but he did not stop. They reached a small cabin by dusk. It was old but sound, a trapper's shelter Gunnar had built years before. One room, stone fireplace, furs piled thick against the wall. The smell of smoke and pine settled into Sarah's bones like a promise. Inside, Gunnar set her down carefully. He built a fire without speaking, movements practiced, efficient. Then he turned to her ankle. He cut away the binding, examined the swelling. His touch was firm, sure. He wrapped it properly this time, splinting it with shaved wood and cloth. "You'll rest," he said. "I hunt." Sarah nodded. "I can still work. I can—" "You rest," he repeated. She obeyed. Days passed. Snow deepened. The cabin became its own world. Gunnar left at dawn and returned at dusk with game slung over his shoulders. Sarah kept the fire alive. She cooked, she mended. She learned to tan hides, her hands adapting quickly to the work. She also watched Gunnar when he thought himself alone. The way he paused before the door, listening to the wind as if it spoke a language only he understood. The way he stared into the fire at night, jaw tight, eyes distant. One evening, as she kneaded dough, her hands cracked and bleeding from the cold, Gunnar appeared beside her. He took her hands without asking. She stiffened instinctively. He opened a tin of rendered sheep fat and rubbed it into her skin, slow and thorough, sealing warmth where the cold had bitten. "Why?" she asked quietly. He did not look up. Hands that work deserve care. Silence stretched. Then she said, barely above a whisper, "I was always told I took up too much space." Gunnar's hands paused. He looked at her then, really looked. "In winter," he said, "thin branches snap first." She swallowed. "I eat too much. I'll ruin your stores." "No," he said. "You eat because you survived hunger once. Your body remembers. That memory keeps you alive." He released her hands gently. "That's not weakness." The wall between them cracked, not loudly, but enough for warmth to seep through. That night, as the wind howled outside, Gunnar slept closer to the fire. Sarah sat nearby, sewing. At some point, he reached out in his sleep, fingers brushing her sleeve. She did not move away. Safety is not always found in walls or weapons. Sometimes it appears in quiet care, in the recognition that endurance leaves marks worth honoring. And when fear loosens its grip, something else has room to grow. Gunnar's cabin, deep winter. The cabin learned them. It learned Gunnar's habits first, boots placed by the door with military precision, axe hung on the same peg every night, traps checked even when snow buried the trails and reason said, "Stay inside." It learned the way he moved through space like someone who had grown used to being alone, careful not to disturb what little order he allowed himself. And then it learned Sarah. At first, she moved as if apologizing for her existence. She hugged the walls. She kept her elbows close, her steps small, her voice softer than the crackle of the fire. She asked permission for everything, even for things that were already hers to do. "May I use more flour? May I cut this hide? May I sit here?" Gunnar answered each request the same way, by doing nothing to stop her. The days fell into a rhythm shaped by necessity. Gunnar rose before light, layered himself in furs, and stepped into the cold with a hunter's patience. Sarah woke later, coaxed life back into the fire, melted snow for water, and stretched dough beneath a towel near the hearth so it would not freeze before it rose. Her ankle healed slowly but well. The swelling faded. Strength returned. When she began moving freely again, she tested herself cautiously, half expecting pain to remind her of her place. It did not. Instead, something else surprised her. She was not getting weaker. Her body fed regularly for the first time in years, responded like land after rain. Her hands steadied. Her breath came easier. The work no longer felt like punishment, but purpose. When Gunnar returned in the evenings, there was always warmth waiting for him. Food, light, a sense that the cabin had been held together in his absence. He noticed. He simply did not comment. One afternoon, snow fell so heavily that the world vanished beyond the window. Gunnar stayed inside, repairing traps. Sarah worked beside him, scraping a hide, her movements confident now, practiced. She spoke without thinking. "I used to hide bread." Gunnar glanced up once, then returned to his work. "Where?" "In my room, under the mattress, in the walls, anywhere I could." She kept scraping, voice steady. "I didn't eat it right away. Just knowing it was there helped me sleep." Gunnar nodded slowly. "I used to count bullets before bed." She looked at him. "Why?" "Because running out meant dying badly." Silence settled again, but it was different now. Not empty. Shared. That night, Gunnar brought out a small block of salt he'd been saving. He shaved it carefully into the stew. Sarah noticed and hesitated. "We don't need—" "We do," he said. "Winter's long." She did not argue. As the weeks passed, the cabin softened. Not physically. The cold still pressed in. The wind still screamed against the walls. But inside, there was laughter now. Quiet and surprised when it happened, as if neither quite trusted it yet. One evening, Gunnar returned injured. It was not dramatic. A torn shoulder from a trapped animal, blood dark against his sleeve. He said nothing when he came in, simply sat heavily on the bench and began to remove his coat. Sarah saw immediately. "Sit still," she said, her voice sharp with something new, authority. She cleaned the wound with snowmelt warmed over the fire, her hands steady. Gunnar watched her work, jaw clenched, but he did not pull away. "You don't flinch," he said. She shrugged. "Pain doesn't scare me." "Why?" "Because I've lived with it longer than fear." She bandaged him carefully, tied the cloth tight. That night they sat closer together. The fire burned low. Gunnar stared into it for a long time before speaking. "My father used to say, 'Softness gets you killed.'" Sarah said nothing. "He died alone," Gunnar continued. "Froze 10 miles from help because he wouldn't turn back. Wouldn't ask." Sarah considered that, then said gently, "Strength that refuses help isn't strength. It's pride." Gunnar looked at her, something unreadable passing behind his eyes. He did not argue. The change in Sarah was quieter but deeper. She began taking up space, not aggressively, not defiantly, simply honestly. She sat where she wanted. She laughed louder. She ate without apologizing, without watching Gunnar's plate or counting his bites. When she moved around the cabin, she no longer tried to disappear, and the world did not end. Gunnar watched her with a growing awareness that unsettled him. Not desire, not yet. Something more fundamental. Dependence, perhaps. Or respect deepening into something warmer. One morning after a night of heavy snowfall, Sarah stood at the window looking out at the white silence. "I used to pray to be smaller," she said. "I thought if I took up less room, people would keep me." Gunnar came to stand beside her. The window framed them both, two solid shapes against the light. "And now?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Now I think the wrong people wanted me small." He nodded. In the mountains, small things vanish. He reached for her without ceremony, his hand settling at her waist, not gripping, just resting. It felt natural, inevitable. She leaned into him, her back against his chest, her weight fitting perfectly. They stayed that way a long time. The first kiss was unremarkable to anyone watching. There was no rush, no hunger, just Gunnar turning her gently, as if checking the wind, and pressing his mouth to hers with a careful pressure that asked rather than took. Sarah answered without hesitation. The cabin held its breath. After, they did not speak of love. They did not name anything. Names carried weight, and winter was not done testing them yet. But when Gunnar went out into the storm now, he always looked back once before closing the door. And Sarah always stood in the doorway, solid and unafraid, watching him go. A home is not defined by walls or fire, but by the permission to exist fully within it. When safety becomes constant, growth follows. And in that quiet blooming, two wounded lives begin to imagine a future larger than survival. Late winter, the edge of the high country. The first sign of trouble came on a morning that was too quiet. Gunnar noticed it before Sarah did. The birds were gone. Not hidden. Gone. The wind moved through the trees without interruption, carrying no sound of wings, no chatter, no warning cries. He stood just outside the cabin, axe in hand, breath fogging the air.
Someone had been here. The tracks were faint, half buried by new snow, but they were wrong. Too narrow for trappers, too careless for mountain men. One set circled the cabin once, slow and deliberate, as if the person wanted Gunnar to know they'd taken their time. When he came back inside, Sarah saw it in his face immediately. "What is it?" she asked. "Nothing," he said too quickly.
She did not believe him. By evening, the dogs howled from far down the valley. Not hunting cries, warning cries. Gunnar barred the door and checked the rifle by the hearth. Sarah watched him in silence, her hands still, her body alert in a way it had never been before. She was no longer the woman waiting to be told what mattered. "Who's coming?" she asked. Gunnar hesitated. That alone was an answer. "Pike," he said finally. "And maybe the sheriff with him." Sarah's chest tightened. "Why?" "Because men like Pike don't forget profit," Gunnar said. "And the law doesn't like transactions it didn't bless." The truth settled between them, heavy and unavoidable. Sarah had not been hired. She had not been rescued. She had been bought. And the world beyond the mountains would not care that she had chosen to stay. "They'll say you stole me," she said quietly. "They'll say worse," Gunnar replied. "They'll say you're property." Sarah sat down slowly, the warmth of the cabin suddenly fragile. "Then I'll go." Gunnar turned on her sharply. "No." "If I leave," she continued, voice steady despite the tremor beneath it, "they won't have reason to hurt you." "They'll hurt me anyway," Gunnar said. "Men like that don't come this far for justice. They come for control." The fire popped, sending sparks upward. Sarah looked around the cabin, the table she'd scrubbed, the beam Gunnar had reinforced with his own hands, the quiet place where she had learned she did not have to disappear. "I won't let them take this," she said. Gunnar studied her, really studied her, and for the first time saw not the woman he'd brought here to survive winter, but the one who had made survival worth more than endurance. "They'll say you're better off without me," he said, "that I trapped you, that you don't know what's good for you." Sarah laughed softly, without humor. "They've been saying that my whole life." Footsteps crunched outside after dark. A voice called out, oily and familiar. "Gunnar Thorsen! By order of the territory, open up!" Pike's voice followed, louder. "Tell the girl to come out. We'll be merciful." Gunnar raised his rifle. Sarah stepped in front of him. "No," she said. He froze. "Move." She did not. "If you stand alone," she said, "they'll see a beast to be put down. If I stand with you, they'll have to see me. And they hate that more than anything." He reached for her arm. She took his hand instead, firm and warm. "I spent my life shrinking," she said. "I won't do it again. Not for them, not for you." The knocking came again, harder this time. When the past returns, it rarely asks permission. It demands payment. And love, when tested by fear, reveals its sharpest edge. Is devotion proven by sacrifice, or by the refusal to abandon what has been built together? Gunnar squeezed Sarah's hand once, then let go. "Then we stand," he said. The cabin. Nightfall. The first shot did not come from Gunnar. It came from the dark. The window on the east wall shattered inward, glass spraying across the floor like ice. Sarah flinched, but did not scream. Gunnar was already moving, pulling her down behind the heavy table as a second shot tore into the doorframe. 2, Gunnar muttered. Maybe 3. They won't rush, Sarah said, surprising herself with how calm her voice sounded. They think time is on their side. Gunnar looked at her sharply. Get to the back room. No. This isn't. I know exactly what this is, she said. They expect you to fight. They don't expect me to exist. Another voice drifted through the night, mocking, amplified by the cold. Girl, you don't owe him anything. Come out now and we'll make this easy. Pike. Sarah stood. Gunnar grabbed her wrist. Sarah. She turned to him. Her eyes were steady, clear. You taught me how the mountains work. Now let me use what I learned. Before he could stop her, she moved to the door. She did not open it. She leaned her full weight against it, bracing the beam Gunnar had set weeks earlier, and raised her voice. I'm not lost, she called. I'm not stolen. And I'm not coming with you. Laughter answered her. You don't get to decide that. I do, Sarah said. I always did. You just didn't like the answer. The men outside shifted. Snow crunched closer. Gunnar felt something unfamiliar claw at his chest. Not fear for himself, fear of watching her be broken. He moved to the side window, rifle steady, sighting shapes in the dark. He fired once. A shout followed, sharp and panicked. The shapes retreated a few steps. They regrouped. They'll burn us out, Gunnar said quietly. Sarah nodded. I know. She scanned the cabin, her mind moving fast, practical. Firewood stacked high, snow packed against the walls, the narrow overhang that funneled wind directly past the west side. Help me, she said. Together they worked fast. They shoved snow against the base of the walls, sealing gaps. Sarah dragged the heaviest furs to the door and soaked them with water from the pot, layering them thick. Gunnar smashed the lantern near the window, spreading oil deliberately across the frozen ground outside. The first torch landed moments later. It hit the oil. Flames leapt high, sudden and violent. One man screamed as fire raced across the ground toward his boots. Panic broke their formation. They didn't plan for that, Sarah said. They never do, Gunnar replied. But Pike was smarter than the others. Sheriff, Pike shouted. Call it! A new voice answered, louder, practiced. Sarah Brennan, this man purchased you unlawfully. Come out now and we'll resolve this without bloodshed. Sarah stepped forward again, visible in the firelight through the cracked window. She did not hide her size. She did not lower her head. You didn't care when I was starving in town, she said. You didn't care when I was thrown out. You only care now because you think someone owns me. Silence followed. Then the sheriff spoke, colder. You don't understand the law. Sarah smiled sadly. I understand it very well. It was never written for people like me. A gunshot cracked the air, closer this time. The door shuddered under impact. Gunnar fired again. Another cry. Footsteps retreated. Then everything went wrong at once. The roof groaned. Snow, heavy and unstable from weeks of accumulation, began to slide. Gunnar heard it an instant before it happened. Down! The avalanche came not as a roar, but as a crushing weight. Snow slammed against the cabin, collapsing part of the roof. The fire died instantly, smothered. Darkness swallowed them. Sarah was thrown forward, pinned beneath a beam. Pain flared through her shoulder, hot and blinding. Gunnar shouted her name. "I'm here," she gasped. "I'm stuck." Outside, chaos erupted. Men shouted. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else cursed. "I think we're done," Sarah said through clenched teeth. Gunnar moved to her, straining against the beam. It would not budge. "Go," Sarah said suddenly. "No." "If they come in and see you standing, they'll shoot you," she said. "If they see me first." She pushed upward, using everything she had. Her body trembled, muscles burned. Fat and mass and stubborn endurance pressed back against the beam, inch by inch. Gunnar stared, stunned. The beam shifted. "Now," she said. Gunnar moved without thinking, slipping into the shadowed corner as the door burst open. Cold air and lantern light flooded the cabin. Pike stepped inside first, coughing, eyes wide as he took in the wreckage. "Damn fool finally buried himself." Sarah dragged herself upright, standing fully in the light. Pike froze. She looked enormous there, framed by broken beams and snow, hair loose, face streaked with soot and blood. She did not look helpless. She looked immovable. "You should have left," she said. Pike raised his gun, hand shaking. Gunnar fired. The shot echoed once. Pike fell. The sheriff backed away slowly, eyes darting between Gunnar and Sarah. This isn't over." "It is," Sarah said. "You just don't know it yet." They left. Not in triumph, in fear. When the door finally shut, the silence was absolute. Sarah sagged against the wall, breath coming in ragged bursts. Gunnar was beside her instantly, hands gentle, frantic. "You held the roof," he said hoarsely. "You held all of it." She laughed weakly. "I told you. I'm built for storms." He pulled her into his arms, not careful, not restrained, holding her like the world might try to take her again if he loosened his grip. Strength is not found in dominance, nor in the willingness to destroy. True strength stands its ground, absorbs the weight of the world, and remains. When the moment comes, it does not ask permission to matter. Early spring, after the thaw. The mountains exhaled slowly. Snow receded from the edges of the world, revealing earth dark and wet beneath. Water ran again, not violently but steadily, as if the land itself were learning how to move after being held still for too long. The cabin bore its scars. One corner of the roof had collapsed. Smoke stains marked the walls, but it still stood. So did they. Sarah's shoulder healed poorly at first. The strain from lifting the beam had torn muscle deep beneath the skin. Gunnar said it as best he could, his hands trembling more from fear than inexperience. She did not complain. Instead, she sat by the fire and let herself be cared for, something she had never learned how to do without shame. Gunnar brought water. He fed her broth with a spoon when lifting her arm was too painful. At night, he slept close, one arm draped protectively over her, as if his body might remember how to keep her whole. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the mended roof, Sarah spoke into the quiet. "I thought if I was useful enough, people wouldn't leave." Gunnar did not look away from the fire. "And now?" "Now I know I don't have to earn staying." He turned to her then. His face was lined with exhaustion and something gentler, something unguarded. "I almost lost you," he said. The words were rough, torn free. And I realized I don't know how to survive without you anymore. She reached for his hand. You don't have to. The confession settled between them, solid and undeniable. When Sarah could stand again, she moved differently, slower, more deliberate. There was no rush now, no need to prove anything. She belonged here in a way that required no defense. One morning, Gunnar brought out his knife and carved into the beam above the hearth. He worked carefully, reverently, each stroke intentional. Sarah, my ember. She watched from the bench, tears tracing warm paths down her cheeks. No one's ever named me something that mattered, she whispered. Gunnar set the knife aside. You mattered before I had words for it. They did not marry in town. There were no witnesses but the mountains and the slow return of green along the valley floor. Gunnar placed a simple band on her finger, fashioned from beaten copper. Sarah pressed her palm over his heart and felt it steady beneath her hand. That was enough. Healing does not erase wounds. It teaches us how to live with them without letting them define us. And love, when it is true, does not demand perfection. It demands presence. 2 years later, travelers passing through the high country spoke differently about Gunnar Thorsen now. They said the mountain man still trapped through winters that broke lesser men, that his axe still split logs clean, and his aim never wavered. But they also said there was light in his cabin year-round, even when storms closed every pass. They spoke of his wife, a large woman with flour on her sleeves and laughter in her voice, a woman who stood solid in doorways and never stepped aside to make herself smaller, a woman who knew how to feed a fire and a man with the same steady hands. Some nights, if the wind was right, travelers swore they could hear singing carry down the valley. Low, warm, unafraid. Inside the cabin, Sarah stood at the stove, bread rising beneath a cloth. Gunnar came in from the cold, stamped snow from his boots, and wrapped his arms around her from behind. You smell like home, he said. She leaned back into him easily. I used to think I was too much. You are, he replied, resting his chin on her shoulder. Too much warmth, too much strength, too much life. Above the hearth, the beam bore 2 carvings now. Sarah, my ember. And beneath it, added later in careful, deliberate strokes, she is not beautiful because she is small. She is beautiful because she endures. In a world that teaches people to shrink in order to be loved, survival belongs to those who refuse, to those who take up space, to those who remain standing when the storm passes. Thank you for staying with this story. If it moved you, share what part stayed with you the longest and carry its warmth into the next winter you face.